In a few minutes, we'll get to our debate, broadcasters, cable companies, and the war for viewers' hearts and minds. Up first, Cory Doctorow, author of Makers and co-editor of Boing Boing, one of the world's most popular blogs. And he comes to us, well, I guess originally from Toronto, but more latterly from London, UK. Welcome back home.
That's right. Only place in the world where you have to specify which London you mean.
That is exactly right. I want to start with Makers. Let's talk about this. The Star called it, quote, a cyberpunk novel about tech-savvy geeks who use their creativity to succeed during a time of economic collapse. Why'd you write this, Cory?
Well, I actually wrote it as a parable about the dot-com collapse, which I lived through when I lived in San Francisco. And it was really interesting. It was a little like how the Grinch stole Christmas, because all the money left San Francisco and all the web startups folded. But the web geeks kept making. It turned out that you didn't need an Aeron chair and a swanky office with a foosball table to invent the web. All you needed was a laptop and someone's Wi-Fi connection, possibly not even yours. And so this is where kind of the Web 2.0 boom came out of and so on. It was really about people who kept making even when the money was gone because they had a drive to make something great. And so I wrote this parable about an economic collapse and people who make hardware as a kind of, you know, future-fied parable about the web. And then the economy collapsed, which was, you know, excellent timing for me.
Good timing for you, not so good for
not for
everybody
else. But and now it seems like a parable about the present day, which is, I always say science fiction is great at predicting the present.
Is it a bit of a how-to?
It is a bit of a how-to, in as much as it's about this new way that people work together, where they form these really ad hoc groups over the web. It's so easy to find people who have the same interests as you. It's so easy to find people to collaborate with, and it's so easy to collaborate with them even across time, where you can look up, you know, how do I make my daughter's werewolf Halloween costume, which we did this year, and you can look that up and you can find a 5-year-old costume recipe, and you're collaborating with people who don't even know that you exist across half a decade's time. So we really, you know, the combination of search engines and cheap publishing has really changed the way we make everything.
Let's talk a bit of politics, though, because this is not the first time that you have used fiction to promote a kind of a political agenda with a bit of an instructional how to take action as well. What is it about this approach that appeals so much to you?
Well, I think science fiction is great at doing this kind of discursive, even manifesto-y kind of fiction, and it's got a really long and honorable history. Obviously, you know, Mary Shelley wasn't worried about animated corpses; she was worried about what technology was doing to Europe, and that's why she wrote Frankenstein. You know, by the same token, Orwell wrote 1984 not as a prediction, but as a parable about present-day world. So, you know, I really like that as a way of kind of putting a frame around the world and describing what you think is going on with it. Science fiction is a great genre for doing it. And the nice thing about fiction is that in an age in which it's very easy to look up the facts about how to do something, you know, back in my day we had, you know, Steal This Book or The Anarchist Cookbook, and it was full of forbidden facts. Those forbidden facts are really easy to find now, but you need to know which facts to search for. And so fiction, by giving you a scenario, opens up your imagination to things that you might look up later.
You do something very, if I may say, unusual, insofar as you give it away for free. If people go to craphound.com, where'd you get that name, incidentally?
It was the name of the first story I ever sold.
Okay, craphound.com, you give all of your literature away for free. Why do you do that?
Well, there's 3 reasons. The first is the economic one. I just think that giving away free downloads of my books sells more print books. For the average person, a print book is an enticement, not a replacement. Most people don't want to read a whole book.
Let me stop you right there. How does that make sense that if you give it away for free, it will entice more sales?
Well, most people don't want to read a whole book off their screen, and books aren't expensive, and they're easy to come by, and it's not like the gap between reading the first couple chapters off your screen and then going out to buy it is a very broad one. It's, you know, you kind of, it's 2 clicks from, oh, this looks good, to, well, there'll be a copy in my mailbox in a couple of days. And it's not like you have to break the bank to buy it. So that works really well. And Tim O'Reilly, I think, said it best. He said, the problem for most artists isn't piracy, it's obscurity. You know, everyone who didn't buy a copy of Makers today did so primarily because they never heard of it, not because someone gave them a free electronic copy. So the commercial case, I think, makes a lot of sense. And I'm not the only one who's really found that to be true. But there's a couple other cases that I think are really important. One is the moral and one is the artistic case. So artistically, it's the 21st century, and copying is just not going to get any harder. So if you're making art that you don't think people are going to copy, I mean, it's historically kind of nice, but it's not exactly contemporary. You know, it's great that someone wants to be the blacksmith at Pioneer Village, but I want to make contemporary art.
You look like a bohemian guy, but in fact, you got a wife?
Yes, and a kid.
And a kid?
Yeah.
So you do have some financial responsibilities.
Oh yeah, and so this is the thing, is that it works, right? So I get to do the thing that's artistically satisfying and commercially viable, right? So Little Brother, my last book, 90,000 hardcovers in print in the US and Canada, 17 foreign editions, film rights sold to the guy who made Transformers, Game rights
Bay?
under negotiation, no, the producer.
Producer, okay.
Film rights and game rights under negotiation, comic rights under negotiation, stage adaptations. You know, it's doing incredibly well, and I didn't have to be a hypocrite and pretend that I don't copy things all day long.
Okay, you moved into this, so let's move into this. Copy, fight, copyright. Let's, with so many worthy causes out there, and with so much energy that you clearly have, why have you made copyright such a central issue for yourself?
Because it's not about copyright. By regulating, it used to be that if you regulated copies, what you regulated were printing presses and record factories. Today, if you regulate copies, because everything on the internet involves making copies, you regulate every part of our digital lives. You regulate how we get health information, you regulate how we get our education, how we earn our living, how we keep in touch with our families. All of that stuff is now moved into the domain of copyright. And so you get these proposals, like there's a 3 strikes proposal that's being floated around the world in various forums. In the UK, it's in part of the law. In Canada, it's coming through a treaty called ACTA, the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement. And what 3 strikes says is that if anyone in your home is accused without proof of 3 acts of copyright infringement, they take away your internet connection. And they put your name on a national registry of people to whom it's a crime to provide access to the internet. So without any proof, without any conviction, without a judge, you and everyone who lives in your home stand to lose your access to health information, your ongoing education, elements of your employment. All of that stuff just pops like a soap bubble. There's no other realm in which we propose to exact a punishment that brutal without an intervention, at least from a judge and a lawyer and so on.
Okay, fair enough. But this is all about digital rights management. And let's tell me why you think it is a bad thing to restrict what someone can do with content that he or she did not create.
Well, again, that's not what digital rights management does. There's never been a piece of digital rights. Digital rights management is that software that tries to stop you making copies of DVDs. And as everybody who has a DVD and wants to make a copy of it knows, it's easy to do. You can just download software like Handbrake from the internet to do it. Or if you don't want to be bothered, you can just go onto a site like the Pirate Bay and download a copy. So it has no effect on unlawful copying. What it does instead is it makes it illegal to make devices that are compatible with existing entertainment technology. So when the cassette deck was invented, which is compatible with a phonogram, right? You can get a cassette deck and record your phonogram. You didn't need permission from the people who press records to make cassette decks. Today, we're entering a world in which your capacity to move your media collection from one format to the next is subject to the approval of the people who made the old stuff.
Okay, but let me take it one step further then. Jane invests time, money, sweat, toil, tears into making a CD. Now she wants to make some money from it. Along comes John. He doesn't want to just take that CD and dub it from phonograph to cassette so that he has a more accessible format to use. He wants to copy that CD of Jane's, and he wants to put it on his blog so hundreds or thousands of other people can use it as well. All of a sudden, Jane can't make money. John has copied for nothing. This is fair?
Well, this has happened before, right? It may not be fair, but it's the real politics. So let's go back 70-some years to the era of vaudeville. In the era of vaudeville, people who were charismatics had a career because they could stand up on stage and do something wonderful. People who were merely virtuosos, who stood there like a statue and played their violin, didn't have any career because no one wanted to see them no matter how good they were at playing. When the phonogram and the radio came along, the vaudevillians protested. They said, "What do you mean my future is sitting in a back room producing material that you introduce to my audience on my behalf? I'm not a virtuoso, I'm a charismatic. I'm not some clerk. I am someone who does something as old and holy as that first story told in front of the first fire." Now, 70 years later, you have people saying, well, it's easy to make a living as an artist, recording or a musician in the 2010s, the 2000s. All you do is you give away copies of your music and use that to bring people into the concert hall, like Madonna's doing. That's why she left her record label and joined a concert promoter. And you have the spiritual descendants of the people who put the vaudevillians out of work saying, "What do you mean I have to get up on stage and perform? I'm not a trained monkey, I'm a white-collar worker. I labor indoors, and when I'm done, I slide my work product under the door and some bourgeois man of commerce introduces it to my audience." The fact is, technology giveth and technology taketh away. Every admiral was a pirate 10 years ago, and every admiral thinks that what the next generation of pirates is doing is wrong.
So Should it all be out there? Should people be able to remix, repurpose whatever other people's work is out there for their own purposes?
Let me ask you a different question.
I thought I got to ask the questions here.
Let me ask, this is the important question, right? If the only way that you can prevent it all from being out there is to surveil the internet, put children in jail, take away people's livelihoods, their capacity to connect to the internet, and all the rest of it, enact a kind of Orwellian state, if that's the only way you can stop it, is that worth it?
Well, presumably there's something short of doing that that would get people to respect intellectual property rights, isn't it?
Well, I don't know what that is. I mean, this is a kind of the beatings will continue until morale improves approach. I mean, we've had 30,000 lawsuits against mostly children in the United States. Hasn't slowed anything. In fact, we have 15 years of enforcement history now. Since the first round of internet enforcement came in 1995 with the WIPO copyright treaties, the National Information Infrastructure hearings in the United States. And not one piece of it has done anything that anyone can find to reduce copying. There's only one thing that ever has been shown to reduce copying, and that's to make it easy to buy stuff.
Okay, let me try this. I think you told us earlier that Little Brother, your last book, the guy who did Transformers, has purchased the rights and he wants to turn it into a movie. What if he just said, you know what? Little Brother's available online. I'm just going to download it for free. I've got it. I know what the story is. I see this actor playing this part. I see that actor playing that part. I don't need to pay Cory anything. He's given it away for free. I'm going to make the movie, and to hell with him. I don't need to spend anything on rights.
So you're confusing copyright as a tool for regulating people.
I'm a confused guy, so help me out here.
So copyright historically has done something reasonably well, which is regulate the supply chain in the entertainment industry, right? Distributors to producers to talent and so on. They all use copyright. They have lawyers involved. It's no big deal. Copyright does that reasonably well. There's some argument that it's gotten a little old, kind of dirty around the edges. It's very complicated, hard for people to understand. But it does it okay. All those people can afford to hire a lawyer. The thing is, your kids can't hire a lawyer to do their homework with them and make sure that they're not violating copyright. Copyright, this is what my friend Jamie Boyle says, copyright used to be like a tank mine. It only went off if you drove over it with a giant record factory, right? Copyright has now turned into something that blows the legs off of children, because this tank mine that used to assume that every time you made a copy, you were doing something big and industrial, now impacts things that you do that are small, quotidian, and everyday, like doing your homework. Like grabbing a little bit of YouTube and using it in a classroom presentation.
Okay, but where's the distinction between I need to pay you for the rights to turn your book into a motion picture versus, wait a sec, I thought everything was out there and I'm allowed to do whatever I want with whatever I want.
If you're an industrial entity, we use the rules that govern industrial relations. If you're an individual, there may be some rules for you, but it shouldn't be the same rules. Like, have you ever bought a friend lunch?
Yes.
Did you file anything with the financial regulator to explain that you transferred some capital from your pocket to your friends?
I don't think so.
But if you were to move a lot of capital from you to an incorporated entity, would you file those papers?
I'm going to say yes here.
Right. So there's nothing wrong with regulations, but applying regulations intended for industry to the relations between individuals makes no sense at all. And it's not hard to figure out who's industry and who's an individual. Maybe there's some fuzzy cases at the edge, that's what we have courts for. But I mean, it's pretty unambiguous to me that while if Universal wants to make a Harry Potter spin-off, they should call up Warner and negotiate it. But if a 12-year-old wants to put up a Harry Potter fan site, she shouldn't have to call up Warner. And moreover, no one at Warner is going to return her phone call if she does.
Right, okay. Can I ask how much they paid you for the rights to make that book into a movie?
Well, so all they bought is the film option.
Okay.
So the film option is not a lot of money. It's about 15 grand US.
That's all right.
Yeah, it's certainly better than a kick in the ass.
We'll take it, okay. Let's, in our last few minutes, just talk a bit about your background, because I think you told the Toronto Star once in an interview that you grew up in protest politics.
Yeah.
I know your dad a little bit. Of course, he was a former New Democrat member of the Ontario legislature in Bob Rae's government.
No, he was a candidate. He never got elected.
He got elected, didn't he?
No, he sure didn't.
He never got elected?
No, no.
I thought for sure he got elected in 1990.
No, he had a real platform, but he didn't get elected. I knocked on a lot of doors for him.
What was family life in that house like growing up?
Well, it's funny. There's a parable about this, or a family story about it. When I was 5, they told me I'd be marching at my aunt's wedding. And they said, "Do you know how to march, Cory?" And I said, "Well, of course I do." And I mimed carrying a placard, walking up and down, shouting, "Not the church and not the state. Women must control their fate." The first photo of me ever published in the paper was Dr. Morgenthaler holding me aloft at a benefit at Cy Woo's when I was 4, wearing a very natty tartan suit, as I recall. So yeah, I grew up really in protest politics. It's good. It means that you grow up thinking that you can change the world and make it a better place.
I mean, you're political, obviously, but you're small p political. Capital P politics never appealed to you?
Well, I'm a member of a political party in the UK. I'm a member of the Liberal Democrats for the main reason, I mean, they're pretty good on most of the issues, but they're the only major political party that doesn't expect me to carry a radio-chipped biometric identity card as an immigrant. And so it's pure self-preservation, really. I mean, you know, my family left the Soviet Union because they didn't want to carry, you know, their papers and show them to people who demanded them. The Brits are demanding something even crazier, which is not only will I carry my papers, but anyone can read them from as much as 50 feet away without my consent or knowledge even. So yeah, I'm big P political in that sense. But no, I've never really thought about standing for office. I got too much else to do.
But I guess it doesn't surprise me that you're with the third place party in British politics. Third place, you know, a long way away from power.
Yeah, although they'll
background,
probably do what a good third party does in a kind of Westminster-style democracy, which is swing the balance of power. I think we've seen some pretty good examples of that in this country.
Okay, one last thing. Your family's view of socialism, has that sort of been central to your view of property rights?
No, not at all, actually. No, that's actually, you know, I think of copyright as a totally utilitarian proposition. It's a very Anglo-American way of approaching it. You know, in Europe, they think of it as this moral right. But here in Canada and in all the Commonwealth democracies, copyright's a purely utilitarian bargain. We need to encourage more creativity. How much copyright do we need to get there? If more copyright doesn't get you more creativity on that, then you stop. So, for example, Cervantes arguably invented the modern novel. If we had given Cervantes the right to stop people from making more novels unless he approved of them, the way that Edison had the right, for example, to stop people from making movies when he held the basic patents on movies, would we get more novels or fewer novels? Better novels or worse novels? I think that what you do is you don't get cluttered up in kind of how much work did he put into it, or what did everyone else get? You say, what's the best way to get the most writing out of this? And you go, well, Cervantes wrote the novel already. He's unlikely to invent another form like the novel, even if we give him 1,000,000 years of copyright on it. Let everyone make the novel. Right? I think that that's the best approach. What we should be doing here with copyright is not ensuring that last year's winners always stay on top, but ensuring instead that we have the broadest participation in culture possible. I don't think that's a socialist proposition. I think that's a Canadian proposition. It's why we have arts funding. It's why we view our arts system as so critical to joining this country up, this big, diverse country. And it's why culture has become such a critical piece of the way that Canada spends and the way Canada conducts its affairs diplomatically. I mean, NAFTA is really distinctive among global trade agreements with the United States in that it's one of the only ones in which culture is a protected industry. Generally, when the US makes a deal with someone, because they're such a net exporter of culture, the deal is that you have to open their markets to culture, your markets to culture, absolutely. Canada retained that, and it's because our culture is so important to us. And I really think that's a very Canadian approach to the question.
Cory, I enjoyed meeting you so much at the Quantum to Cosmos Festival in Waterloo, and we're really grateful you could spend some more time with us here tonight at TVO. Thanks so much.
Well, it's great to be back in Canada. Thank you.